Hello everyone. Thanks for taking time of your day to watch this video. Today we're going to read a novel called How to Live as an Academy Extra Villain, about a boy who one day recalled his past life memories and realized that this place is the world of the Academy genre that he saw in his past life, and his fiancée is the heroine of the protagonist, while he is the early exit extra, a pathetic villain. Let's begin, shall we? And finally, I will now inform you of the outcomes of the disciplinary actions related to the acts of violence that occurred on the campus last week. Firstly, Eugene from Year 1, Class F. You have been found in violation of 3 school rules. As per procedure, we will provide detailed notifications of the violations. A clear and crisp voice echoed in the student council meeting room, as silent as a graveyard. The room was laid out with tables and chairs, resembling a courtroom, and students were sitting in their respective seats, waiting anxiously for the results. A girl stood in front of them, reading from a long, horizontal piece of parchment. St. Clifford's Academy. Code of Conduct. Rule 3, Clause 4. Any private duels not authorized by a superior are prohibited on school grounds. Clause 7. Any physical or mental violence and private sanctions between enrolled students are prohibited. Clause 12. Any utilization or damage to campus facilities for private purposes is prohibited. Based on the testimonies of the involved parties and the scene, the following are the rules Eugene has been confirmed to have violated. Eugene, do you admit to the rule violations? After finishing the recitation, the girl shifted her gaze to the blonde boy sitting in the chair in front. I admit. However, the blonde boy, his expression displaying some frustration, spoke, seeming about to object, but the girl immediately cut him off with her businesslike voice and continued. Please save your counter-arguments for after all the announcements. I will then proceed to tell you the findings of the disciplinary committee. Eugene. As a student at St. Clifford's Academy, a school founded by His Imperial Majesty and supported by the citizens of the Empire, bringing disrepute to the school, violating multiple rules, and causing disturbances within the school, your actions cannot be considered a minor offence. However, considering that the other party first violated the rules, and that it was a one versus many situation, and, crucially, that your actions were not driven by a desire for personal gain, but rather a necessary intervention to aid a fellow student who was being subjected to coercive behavior, the disciplinary committee hereby sentences you to 72 hours of on-campus community service for you. Ah! The boy's previously somber expression brightened as if from fear of the coming punishment and remorse for his behavior. The blonde boy lifted his head and gazed at the girl standing before him. Good job, Eugene. It might be challenging to balance the community service with your academic schedule, but I believe you can manage. I'll help as much as I can, so let's work together and get through this. The voice that a moment ago had been stern and bureaucratic now sounded impossibly kind and warm, as if coming from an entirely different person. And that warmth was genuine, as proven by the sincere and affectionate smile that graced the girl's face. Senior Patricia, this is outrageous. That's right. How could you show such favoritism to a commoner like... Enough. As an outcry arose from across from Eugene, Patricia Austin turned her gaze towards the source of the commotion. The smile and sweet voice from a moment ago were nowhere to be seen, and the girl had quickly reverted back to her initial businesslike voice and expressionless face. Turning her head, Patricia's eyes caught sight of 3 boys, one with red hair, one with silver hair, and one with black hair. 2 boys, one with reddish hair and the other with silver hair, were engaged in a heated discussion, while a 3rd boy, with handsome appearance and black hair, was quietly sitting between them. Unlike the other 2, he was silent and seemed to be attentively listening to Patricia's verdict. When you enter this academy, from the moment you set foot in it until the day you graduate, every enrolled student is legally granted equal status. Whether you were a commoner before, an imperial noble, or even a member of the imperial family, it doesn't matter. Several weeks haven't even passed since the headmaster spoke these words at the entrance ceremony. and already we hear complaints. Gentlemen, that thing on your shoulder is not something you wear as an ornament. But I told you to be quiet, didn't I? Let me continue with the announcement of the results. Ignoring the protests of the two boys, Patricia continued to read from the parchment. Adapting to the new reality that had befallen me required some time of adjustment. It was only natural, if not expected. The life I had been living vanished into thin air beyond the horizon, and in an instant a world that seemed like the distant Middle Ages unfolded before my eyes without allowing me any time to adapt. Nevertheless, perhaps due to receiving even the slightest bit of explanation beforehand, I didn't need an extended period of time to collect my thoughts. As the girl continued her announcement, my mind slowly started finding its place within the new body. Year 1, Class C, Scott Thompson. 5 confirmed violations of school rules. Accordingly, in accordance with procedure. Rule 3, Clause 4, Clause 7, Clause 12. Rule 4, Clause 1. The Student Council hereby sentences Scott Thompson to 2 weeks of suspension and 96 hours of on-campus community service. The girl in front shifted her gaze and continued smoothly reciting from the parchment. The silver-haired boy, who had protested at the top of his lungs earlier, fell silent, his head bowed in resignation as he heard the contents of the parchment. Philip Osborne, Year 1, Class C. 4 violations of the school rules were found. Rule 3, Clause 4, Rule 4, Clause 1, Rule 4, Clause 3. It is hereby sentenced that Philip Osborne be suspended for 2 weeks and given 72 hours of on-campus community service. The boy who was caught seemed to give up any further defense when he heard the charges were finalized. Continuing to protest when their guilt had already been conclusively proven was tantamount to begging for a more severe punishment, which was not a bad option for them at this point. Lastly, Year 1, Class B, Edwin Reed. Patricia, the girl with silver hair, was calling out the name of a certain student, Edwin Reed. The name felt somewhat familiar, but it was difficult to remember where I had heard it. The girl shifted her gaze briefly in my direction before returning her attention to the parchment. Burned Les's hair using fire magic, causing burns to the scalp. Cut off Martin's left ear with amputation magic, which is forbidden for interpersonal use. In the guise of a duel, you used a real sword to inflict a full-week laceration on Eldridge's chest. Assaulted Kimmons out of sight of the professor during an off-campus class. The content being read clearly indicated the crimes committed by Edwin Reed. The silver-haired girl's face grew more and more filled with disgust as she recited. The student council members observing, too, expressed various forms of rejection through furrowed brows and sighs. And thus, a total of 9 instances of rule violations have been confirmed. Edwin Reed, do you admit to these rule violations? The girl had finished reciting and was calling out Edwin's name again and again, but that name was clearly now unfamiliar. Where have I heard it? Ah, Edwin Reed. I remembered now. Edwin Reed. My memory is a little fuzzy, and though somewhat vague, I'm pretty sure he was a character from a book I had read, or a game I had played. But who was he? He seemed like a character that appeared early in the story. Wait a moment. Edwin Reed! Yes? Suddenly, a loud voice and a cold gaze met my startled expression as I blurted out. When I followed the source of the gaze, I saw a beautiful silver-haired girl glaring at me with hostility in her eyes. But here was the thing. I was sure I had never seen this girl before, yet her eyes felt so familiar, like I had known them for a long time. Why was she looking at me like that, and why was she calling me Edwin Reed? My name is... As my mind spun with various thoughts, gradually adapting to the new reality, I began to understand why the girl was calling me by that name. Why was she looking at me like that? And most importantly, what role have I taken on in this world? Get yourself together. Please keep in mind that if you ever again approach this disciplinary committee with such an attitude, you will be deemed to be disrespecting the authority of the student council, granted by His Majesty and the citizens of the Empire, and further sanctions may be imposed on you. Understand? Yes? Oh, no. I mean, I'll keep that in mind. I admit to the violations. I clearly knew this scene. A similar situation was unfolding before my eyes. Ha! Next, I will tell you the results of your punishment. The silver-haired girl sighed, then resumed reading the parchment. Edwin Reed violated numerous academy rules, bringing disrepute to the academy. The gravity of your offence is evident in the fact that you have committed multiple acts of violence against your classmates simply to fulfill your own sadistic desires, and that you have shown no remorse during the interviews conducted prior to the convening of the disciplinary committee. Accordingly, the committee sentences Edwin Reed to 60 days of suspension and a demotion from Class B to Class D upon return. Upon your return, your studies will continue in Class D, and your advancement or demotion in the future will be determined based on your academic performance. That is all. Edwin Reed, do you have any objections? None. As I obediently responded, the bright silver-haired girl and the other student council members sitting behind her on jury looked slightly taken aback, as if they hadn't expected me to accept the punishment without resistance. It would make sense. The original Edwin Reed would never have accepted this type of punishment willingly. With that said, we will conclude the convening of the disciplinary committee here. Please note that the sanctions imposed will take effect immediately upon the end of today's campus schedule at 17 Ra. If individuals who have been sentenced to suspension are found to remain on campus after that time, they may be subject to further penalties. That is all. After a moment of stunned silence, Patricia concluded her words, signaling the end of the disciplinary committee. Just then, Eugene, the handsome blonde boy, approached Patricia, clasped her hands together, and said something to her. Perhaps thrown off by the sudden physical contact or Eugenie's unexpected behavior, Patricia seemed unable to respond, stammering in place. Eugene's actions appeared to be causing her embarrassment, and her face seemed to be tinged with a blush. Other students came over to talk to Eugene once he released Patricia's hands. Engaging with those around him, Eugene let go of Patricia's hands and conversed with others. Patricia, finally freed, took a step back and fanned her face with her hand, seemingly in an attempt to regain composure. I looked around, taking in the scene. To my sides were the silver-haired and red-haired boys, both sitting dejectedly, their heads bowed, Scott Thompson and Philip Osborne. Now that I knew their names, the situation became even more palpable. Where I currently stood marked the beginning of a story, and to survive in this world, I needed to take action. Edwin Reed, to change my fate, which would have been to be banished from this place. That's the end of the first chapter. Thank you for listening to my audiobook. I hope you have enjoyed it so far. If you want to continue the journey, be sure to check out Chapter 2, which will be released soon on my YouTube channel.